a $20 million mansion, perched high in the Hollywood Hills, a self-made tech millionaire who seemed to have it all, and his brilliant, pregnant wife who was about to lose everything. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of Elliot Vance and the devastating secret he kept. He thought his money made him invincible, his charm a shield against any consequence. But he made one critical mistake. He underestimated the woman he married. He never imagined that the very home he saw as his ultimate trophy would become the weapon she used to reclaim her life, turning his greatest betrayal into her ultimate victory. Stick with me as we unravel how one woman's heartbreak was forged into a masterclass in justice. The house was more than a structure of glass, steel, and Italian marble. It was a testament, perched atop a secluded peak in Bel Air, with a view that spilled Los Angeles at your feet, like a carpet of scattered diamonds. The estate known as the Crest was Elliot Vance's monument to himself. From the outside, it was an architectural marvel of sharp angles and sweeping curves, a place where infinity pools bled into the horizon, and floor-to-ceiling windows erased the boundary between inside and the vast open sky. Inside it was a home, and that was entirely thanks to his wife, Isabella Rossi. Elliot Vance was the kind of man magazines write about. At 36, he had the sharp intelligence and restless energy of a Silicon Valley prodigy, which he was combined with the polished, ruthless charm of a Wall Street titan which he had become. His software company, Nexus Dynamics, had revolutionized data security, and in doing so had made him a formidable fortune. He was decisive, charismatic, and possessed a belief in his own infallibility that often bordered on arrogance. Isabella, by contrast, was the quiet force that grounded him. An architect with a reputation for blending modern minimalism with organic warmth. She had a mind as sharp as his, but a spirit that was infinitely more gentle. Where Elliot saw assets and acquisitions, Isabella saw beauty and potential. They met at a charity gala 5 years prior. He was captivated by her elegance and the way she discussed structural engineering with the same passion others reserved for poetry. She was drawn to his ambition, but fell in love with the rare, unguarded moments when the boy from a working-class Ohio town shone through the millionaire's facade. Their life at the Crest was, by all accounts, perfect. Mornings were spent on the terrace, sipping coffee as the California sun burned the marine layer off the city below. Evenings were a mix of lavish industry parties, where Isabella stood as a graceful counterpoint to Elliot's booming presence, or quiet nights in where they would trace the constellations from their master bedroom's retractable skylight. Isabella had poured her soul into the Crest. While Elliot had funded it, she had birthed it. Every blueprint, every shade of white, every piece of custom-built furniture was a product of her vision. She had walked the dusty construction site for 2 years, her Italian leather boots covered in grime, arguing with contractors and ensuring every detail was executed to perfection. The house was her professional masterpiece and the intended sanctuary for their future family. That future had officially begun 6 months ago. 2 heartbeats. The doctor had said, a warm smile on her face as she pointed to the grainy ultrasound monitor. "Congratulations, you're having twins." Elliot had wept. Actual silent tears streamed down his face as he clutched Isabella's hand. In that moment, all the ruthlessness of the boardroom predator melted away. He was just a man in awe, a future father overwhelmed by the miracle of it all. That evening, he'd brought home a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a diamond, but 2 simple gold lockets on a single chain. "One for each of them," he'd whispered, fastening it around her neck. "So they're always close to your heart. and you're always close to mine." Now, standing in the half-finished nursery, Isabella ran a hand over her burgeoning belly. The walls were painted a soft, neutral sage. 2 identical cribs carved from light oak stood waiting. She felt a kick, then another in a different spot, and she laughed a pure, happy sound that echoed in the spacious room. Elliot was in London for a 48-hour business trip closing a major merger. He was due back tomorrow. She missed him, but she was content. She had her babies, her home, her husband. She was living inside the beautiful dream she had so meticulously designed. She felt the cool gold of the lockets against her skin and smiled. Everything was perfect. She had no idea she was standing at the epicenter of a life about to be demolished, and that the architect of her joy was also the architect of its ruin. To understand the twist that would eventually redefine Isabella's life, one had to understand the foundation upon which the crest was built. Not the concrete and steel, but the professional understanding between husband and wife. When Elliot first purchased the 3-acre plot of land for a staggering $5 million, he handed the project to a renowned, high-priced architectural firm. Their initial designs were cold, ostentatious, and sterile. They designed a palace, not a home. After 3 months of frustration, Elliot, exasperated, had turned to Isabella over dinner. "They don't get it," he'd vented, swirling the wine in his glass. "They're building a feature for a magazine. I want a place for us. I want the place we'll bring our kids home to." Isabella had been sketching on a napkin, as she often did. She slid it across the table. It was a rough but brilliant concept of the house, with lines that followed the natural contours of the hill, integrating the structure with the landscape instead of dominating it. Elliot had stared at the napkin, then at her. "You do it," he said, his voice filled with sudden clarity. "You design it, every inch of it." Isabella was hesitant. "Elliot, mixing business and marriage can be messy. I'm your wife, not your employee." "You won't be my employee," he insisted. "You'll be my partner. I want to pay you. Your full fee. Rossi Designs will be the lead architectural and project management firm. We'll draw up a proper contract. This is your masterpiece, Bella. It should be your name on the blueprints, and you should be compensated for it." He was adamant, framing it as a matter of respect for her talent. It was one of the things she loved most about him. He saw her brilliance and wanted the world to see it too. So she agreed. They hired a boilerplate contract lawyer to draft the paperwork. It was a standard design and project management agreement. It stipulated that Rossi Designs, a sole proprietorship under Isabella Rossi, would be granted full creative control and oversight of the construction of the property at 1420 Skyline Drive. It detailed her commission, a percentage of the total construction cost, a common arrangement. But Isabella, ever meticulous, added a clause of her own. Her lawyer, a practical woman named Catherine Mercer, who specialized in intellectual property and corporate contracts, had suggested it. The clause was dense with legalese, but its essence was simple. It stated that in lieu of a traditional cash payment for her design, intellectual property, and intensive project management services, a fee that would have amounted to well over $2 million. Rossi Designs would instead be compensated with a lien and a transferable equity stake in the property itself to be vested upon the project's official completion and the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. When Isabella presented it to Elliot, he was in the middle of a frantic week of negotiations for Nexus Dynamics. He glanced at the red-lined paragraph she pointed out. "Equity stake lien. What's all this, Bella?" he asked, distracted, scrolling through emails on his phone. "It's just a professional formality." "Elliot," she explained calmly, It protects my work, my intellectual property. Instead of you writing me a huge check that we just put back into our joint account, my payment becomes a formal documented piece of the house itself. It's cleaner for tax purposes, and it properly attaches my name to the project's value. Kate said it's the smartest way to structure it for a project of this scale, between spouses. He barely looked up. Whatever you and your lawyer think is best. It's your show. He took the pen she offered, scrawled his signature, Elliot R. Vance, at the bottom of the page, and immediately turned his attention back to his phone. He had just signed a document concerning the most valuable asset he owned, without reading it all, because he trusted his wife, and more importantly, because he never imagined a world where the legal fine print between them would ever matter. He filed it away in his mind as a cute formality, a way to make Isabella feel professionally validated. He had no idea he had just handed her the key to his gilded kingdom. The 2-year construction was a grueling process. While Elliot jetted around the world expanding his empire, Isabella was on site at 6 a.m. every morning, managing crews solving complex engineering problems and personally sourcing materials from Italian quarries and German steel mills. The crest became her life's work. She knew every wire in its walls, every pipe beneath its floors. She had fought for every detail, from the book-matched marble in the master bathroom to the custom ventilation system that kept the air clean and fresh for their future children. When the house was finally finished, the certificate of occupancy issued the agreement she'd made him sign was officially vested. A copy was filed with the county clerk's office, a quiet, unassuming document buried in a mountain of permits and deeds. A promise carved in stone, forgotten by the man who signed it, but held in the memory of the woman who wrote it. Elliot's trip to London was a resounding success. The merger went through and Nexus Dynamics' stock soared. He was due to land at LAX at 5 p.m. Isabella, wanting to celebrate, had planned a special dinner. She was just putting the finishing touches on the table setting when her iPad, which was linked to their family iCloud account, chimed with an email notification. It was an alert for Elliot's account. Usually she ignored them, respecting his privacy. But the subject line caught her eye. Confirmation, your upcoming stay at the Seraphine Hotel. Curiosity piqued, she tapped it open. It couldn't be for the London trip. He stayed at the Corinthia. The Seraphine was a ridiculously exclusive, notoriously discreet boutique hotel in Napa Valley. The reservation was for 2 nights starting next Friday. It was for the Celestial Suite, famous for its private plunge pool and romantic atmosphere. A surprise for me was her first hopeful thought. Maybe a pre-baby getaway. But the dates were strange. He had a board meeting in San Francisco that Friday. He'd told her he'd be back the same night. A small, cold knot began to form in her stomach. She tried to dismiss it, to scold herself for her suspicion, but something compelled her to look further. In the same email chain, nested below the confirmation, was the original request forwarded from his work email to his private one, and below that, a reply. From Chloe. Sterling at Nexus Dynamics. Com to Elliot. Vance at nexusdynamics.com. Subject re, next weekend. It's booked, the Celestial Suite, just like you wanted. I can't wait. I'll clear my calendar for that Friday afternoon. Don't worry about your board meeting. You'll be done in time. This is going to be so much better than London. XOXO. Isabella read the email 3 times. Her vision blurred. The name Chloe Sterling was vaguely familiar. A new hire in the marketing department, maybe. Young, ambitious, pretty. She'd met her briefly at the company Christmas party. This is going to be so much better than London. The word slammed into her like a physical blow. London. He wasn't alone in London. The realization was a cascade of ice water through her veins. The 48-hour trip. The time differences he'd used as an excuse for brief, hurried calls. It wasn't a merger that had kept him occupied. Her hands were shaking so badly, she almost dropped the iPad. With a sickening lurch, her mind began to connect dots she hadn't even realized were there. The late nights at the office he'd blamed on server crashes. The sudden intense interest in a new fitness regime. The second phone, which he'd claimed was purely for international business, to avoid roaming charges. The world which seconds before had been so vibrant and full of promise bleached into a stark, colorless landscape of betrayal. The scent of the roasted chicken she'd prepared for his welcome home dinner suddenly smelled like rot. The beautiful, serene house felt like a tomb. She stumbled into their master bathroom, a cavern of white marble and gleaming chrome that she had designed to be a sanctuary, and retched into the toilet. It wasn't morning sickness. It was the violent physical expulsion of a beautiful lie. When she was done, she gripped the cold marble countertop, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a horror she'd only ever seen in movies. Her hand instinctively went to her belly, to the two innocent lives who knew nothing of this poison. And then her gaze fell to the gold lockets around her neck. So they're always close to your heart, and you're always close to mine. With a strangled sob, she ripped the chain from her neck. The delicate gold links snapped and the lockets fell clattering with a tinny mocking sound against the pristine marble floor she had chosen. The crack in the facade of her perfect life had just splintered into a chasm, and she was staring into the abyss. At that moment, the front door chimed, signaling Elliot's code had been entered. "Bella, I'm home!" His cheerful voice boomed from the foyer, echoing through the house that was no longer a home, but a crime scene. Isabella composed herself with the speed and precision of a bomb disposal expert. She splashed cold water on her face, took a series of deep, shuddering breaths, and walked out of the bathroom just as Elliot entered their bedroom, dropping his briefcase by the door. He looked triumphant, energized by his success. He strode towards her arms, open for an embrace. "There she is. God, I missed you. I missed you, 3, he said, beaming as he reached for her belly. Isabella took a small, involuntary step back. His smile faltered. "Everything okay? You look pale." "I saw an email, Elliot," she said, her voice a low, chilling monotone. She refused to let it shake. "A hotel reservation in Napa with someone named Chloe Sterling." The change in him was instantaneous and terrifying. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, hard opacity. A mask of practiced indignation snapped into place. "What?" He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Chloe. From Marketing Bella, what are you talking about? Are you going through my emails now?" "It popped up on the iPad," she stated, keeping her eyes locked on his. "The reservation is for next Friday, for the Celestial Suite." Elliot ran a hand through his hair, a classic gesture of exasperation he'd perfected in the boardroom. "It's a work trip. My God, the board meeting is in San Francisco. We're entertaining a potential new investor who owns a vineyard in Napa. Chloe is on the marketing team. She's responsible for coordinating corporate hospitality. It's her job." The lie was so smooth, so plausible. For a split second, she wanted to believe it. Oh, how she desperately wanted to believe it. The email didn't sound like it was for an investor. She pushed her voice, gaining a slight tremor. It said, "This is going to be so much better than London." It was signed with XOXO. Elliot's expression hardened into one of deep, profound disappointment, not in himself, but in her. It was a masterful performance. "Bella, listen to yourself," he said, his tone shifting to one of condescending pity. "You're pregnant. Your hormones are all over the place. You're feeling insecure. I get it. But to accuse me of this, with an intern, it's insulting. Chloe is a kid, and frankly, this paranoia is not healthy for you or the babies." Gaslighting. He was dousing her reality in fuel and handing her a match, daring her to question her own sanity. "So you weren't with her in London?" Isabella asked, her last shred of hope clinging to his answer. "Of course not. I was in meetings for 48 hours straight. You know how critical this merger was," he scoffed, his eyes flashing with anger. "I come home having just secured our family's future for generations, and this is the welcome I get. Accusations based on a completely misread email. I expected better from you, Bella." He was turning it all around, positioning himself as the victim, the hard-working husband betrayed by his hormonal, hysterical wife. It was brutally effective. Doubt, a venomous weed, began to sprout in the cracks of her certainty. Was she overreacting? Was the stress of the pregnancy making her see things that weren't there? He saw her waver and pressed his advantage, his voice softening. "Come on," he said, stepping forward again, this time successfully pulling her into a hug. She stood rigid in his arms. "Let's forget this. I'm exhausted. You're exhausted. Let's just have that amazing dinner I smell and go to bed. I'll cancel the Napa trip. If it's making you this uncomfortable, I'll just have the investor meet us in the city. It's not worth upsetting you." He was offering a concession, a seemingly loving compromise that was in fact a brilliant strategic retreat. By cancelling the trip, he would erase the evidence and simultaneously prove his devotion, leaving her looking and feeling like a fool. She let him lead her out of the bedroom, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and pain. But as they sat at the dining table under the warm glow of the chandelier, she had chosen. She watched him. She watched the way he avoided her eyes as he talked about the merger. She noticed the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in his hand as he lifted his wine glass. She saw the truth not in his words, but in the frantic energy he expended to conceal it. He wasn't just lying. He was a virtuoso of deceit. And in that moment, her doubt didn't vanish. It calcified. The heartbreak was still a raw, open wound, but something new began to form around it, a cold, hard shell of resolve. He thought she was a fragile, hormonal mess. He thought he could manage her, manipulate her, and dismiss her. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. The next morning, while Elliot was in the shower, Isabella picked up her phone. She didn't call her mother or her best friend. She scrolled through her contacts to a name she hadn't needed in years, the lawyer who had helped her draft the contract for the crest. The phone rang twice before a crisp, no-nonsense voice answered. "Catherine Mercer." "Kate," Isabella said, her own voice low and steady. "It's Isabella Rossi. I think I'm going to need your help. My husband is cheating on me, and I need to prepare for a divorce." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Isabella," Kate said, her tone shifting from professional to concerned. "Okay. Deep breath. Come to my office this afternoon, and whatever you do not let him know you've spoken to me. From this moment on, you are the loving, apologetic, hormonal wife he thinks you are. We play his game until we have the board set to win ours." Catherine Kate Mercer's office in Century City was the antithesis of Isabella's warm, organic style. It was a fortress of chrome, black leather, and smoked glass with a panoramic view of the city that felt less like an invitation and more like a declaration of conquest. Kate herself matched her surroundings. In her mid-40s, with a razor-sharp bob and an impeccably tailored suit, she radiated an aura of intimidating competence. Isabella sat across the vast mahogany desk recounting the story in a low, controlled voice. She told Kate about the email, the confrontation, the masterful gaslighting. She didn't cry. Her grief was too cold, too heavy for tears. Kate listened without interruption. Her fingers steepled her eyes, never leaving Isabella's face. When Isabella finished, Kate was silent for a long moment. "He's good," Kate said, her voice devoid of sympathy replaced by a grudging professional respect. "The immediate denial, the pivot to victimhood, the manipulation of your pregnancy, it's classic high-level narcissist playbook. He's insulated by his money and his power, and he assumes you are just another one of his assets to be managed. This will not be an easy fight, Isabella. Men like Elliot Vance don't lose. They crush." "I know," Isabella replied, her voice firm. "That's why I'm here. I don't want to be crushed." "Good," Kate said, a flicker of a smile touching her lips. "First rule, the status quo is your camouflage. You go home and you apologize. You tell him you were emotional, that you're embarrassed for doubting him. You play the role he's written for you. It will lull him into a false sense of security. We need him complacent while we dig." The idea of apologizing was sickening, but Isabella understood the strategy. Elliot's arrogance was his greatest weakness, and they would use it against him. "What are we digging for?" Isabella asked. "Everything," Kate answered, leaning forward. "We need more than just an affair. In California, infidelity has little bearing on the division of assets. It's a community property state. You're entitled to half of everything earned during the marriage. But half is a fluid number when you're dealing with a man like Elliot. He'll have assets hidden in shell corporations, offshore accounts, trusts. Our job is to find it all before he can make it disappear. I'll hire a forensic accountant, the best in the business. A man named Martin Webb. He's a bloodhound." Over the next few weeks, Isabella lived a double life. By day, she was the doting wife discussing baby names, rubbing Elliot's shoulders after a long day, and even apologizing profusely for her moment of hormonal paranoia. He soaked it up, relieved and smug, convinced he had weathered the storm. He was more affectionate than ever, a man absolved, showering her with gifts and affection that now felt like poison. By night, after he was asleep, Isabella became a spy in her own house. Guided by discreet instructions from Kate and Martin, she downloaded files from his office computer, photographed documents from his briefcase, and tracked tail numbers of the private jets he chartered. The picture that emerged was uglier than she could have imagined. Chloe Sterling wasn't just an intern he was sleeping with. Elliot had co-signed a lease on a luxury apartment for her in Santa Monica. He had paid off her $80,000 in student loans. He had even set her up as the sole officer of a new LLC funded with over $1 million from a Nexus Dynamics subsidiary account disguised as a marketing research venture. He wasn't just having an affair. He was building a new life, using their marital assets to fund it. Each discovery was a fresh stab of betrayal. But Isabella channeled the pain into a cold, methodical focus. She was no longer just a heartbroken wife. She was a general gathering intelligence, preparing her battlefield. The linchpin, Kate explained, would be the house. "The crest is your biggest asset and your biggest vulnerability," Kate said during one of their secret meetings. "It's worth over $20 million. He'll fight you tooth and nail for it. He sees it as his legacy. We can argue that it's community property, but his lawyers will argue that the land was purchased with his premarital funds, and he'll try to use that to claim it as separate property. Isabella felt a knot of anxiety tighten. The house was more than money to her. It was her creation, the intended home for her children. The idea of Elliot bringing Chloe there was unbearable. "There might be something else," Isabella said slowly, her mind drifting back to the early days of construction. "We signed a contract, a professional agreement for my architectural services." Kate's eyes sharpened. "Tell me everything about it." Isabella explained the agreement, the justification and the specific clause she had added, the one compensating her work with a vested equity stake and a lien on the property itself. Kate was completely still, her expression unreadable. "You added a clause giving yourself an equity stake in lieu of payment, and he signed it." "Yes, he barely read it. He was busy," Isabella said. "I have a copy in my files. I think the original was filed with the county." Kate stood up and walked to the window looking out over the city. She was silent for a full minute. When she turned back, she had the look of a predator that had just caught the scent of blood. "Isabella," she said, her voice electric with a newfound intensity. "Get me a copy of that agreement. Now! If it says what you think it says, and it was properly executed and filed, this isn't a divorce negotiation anymore. This is a hostage situation, and you're the one holding the gun." Isabella found the document in a file box labeled Crest, Permits and Legal, tucked away in her home office. Her hands trembled as she lifted the document bound by a simple staple in the top left corner. Design and Project Management Agreement. There it was, in cold black ink. She scanned through the boilerplate language until she found it. Article 4, Section B, Compensation and Intellectual Property. In consideration for the architectural designs, project management services, and the licensing of all associated intellectual property provided by Rossi Designs, the client Elliot R. Vance agrees to a transfer of equity. Rossi Designs shall, upon issuance of the final certificate of occupancy, be vested with a 40% ownership stake in the property. This stake shall be secured by a senior lien against the property title, superseding all other non-municipal liens. 40%. She had forgotten the exact number, but seeing it there made her breath catch in her throat. At the time, it had been a figure calculated by Kate, based on her commission, the value of her firm's intellectual property, and the immense full-time work of managing the 2-year build. It was a fair, legally sound valuation of her professional contribution. And at the bottom of the page was his signature, that bold, arrogant scrawl she knew so well. Elliot R. Vance. She immediately scanned it and sent the encrypted file to Kate. The response came less than 5 minutes later. It was a single line. "He's not going to know what hit him." Kate's team worked with surgical precision. They confirmed the document had been properly filed with the Los Angeles County Recorder's Office 2 years ago. It was a public record, an ironclad legal instrument. The forensic accountant Martin Webb cross-referenced this with his own findings. Elliot had leveraged the house for a recent business loan, conveniently omitting his wife's 40% equity stake and senior lien from the financial disclosures to the bank. This was the keystone, the piece that locked the entire structure of their case into place. The affair, the hidden money, the secret apartment for his mistress that was leverage for a favorable settlement. It was embarrassing, reputation-damaging material. But the document about the house, that was something else entirely. It wasn't just about the divorce, it was about bank fraud. "He committed a felony, Isabella," Kate explained in a hushed, urgent phone call. By misrepresenting the ownership structure of the crest to secure a multi-million-dollar loan, he defrauded a federally insured financial institution. That carries a prison sentence. Isabella felt a wave of nausea. Prison. As much as he had hurt her, the thought of the father of her children being incarcerated was horrifying. "I don't want him in jail," she whispered. "And he won't go," Kate assured her, "because he is going to be presented with a choice. Option A. A brutal, public, litigious divorce. We expose the affair with his employee. We expose the shell corporations. And we hand over the evidence of his bank fraud to the district attorney. His company's stock will plummet. His reputation will be incinerated, and he'll face a federal investigation." Kate paused, letting the weight of it sink in. Or, option B, a quiet private settlement. He walks away, and we don't breathe a word of this to anyone. But our price for silence is very, very high. The final piece of the puzzle was a twist of pure dramatic irony, discovered by Kate's private investigator. Chloe Sterling, the ambitious young woman at the center of the affair, was not just some random intern. Her father was Arthur Sterling, senior partner at Sterling, Croft and Lowell, one of the most powerful and ruthless corporate law firms in the city. The very firm that Elliot had just placed on retainer to handle his potential marital issues. Elliot, in his arrogance, was preparing to use his mistress's father to crush his own wife. "It's perfect," Kate had said with a grim smile. "He's bringing the instrument of his own destruction right to the table." The trap was set. All they had to do was wait for the lion to walk into it. The call came a week later. Elliot's new lawyer, a man named Peterson from Arthur Sterling's firm, requested a meeting to discuss the preliminary terms of an amicable separation. Isabella was 7 months pregnant, now the twins active and strong. As she walked into Kate's office for the meeting, she placed a hand on her belly. This wasn't for revenge anymore. This was for them. This was for their future. This was for the home she had built for them, and would be damned if she was going to let him take it away. The day of the meeting, the sky over Los Angeles was a flat, unforgiving gray. Isabella stood before the full-length mirror in her vast walk-in closet, a space she had designed with warm cedar and soft lighting to feel like a sanctuary. Today, it felt like an armory. She was choosing her battle dress. She bypassed the soft maternity dresses and flowing silks Elliot had bought for her. Instead, her hands found a charcoal-grey cashmere tunic, structured and severe, and a pair of tailored black trousers. She pulled her dark hair back into a low, tight chignon, the style severe and professional. Her face in the mirror was pale, but her eyes, usually warm and expressive, were like polished stone. She was 7 months pregnant, a visible testament to the life and future he had so casually betrayed. Yet she refused to appear soft or vulnerable. She was not here as a wife. She was here as the other principal in a broken contract. As she slid her feet into a pair of low, comfortable but elegant black loafers, she felt the twins stir within her. A gentle roll on her left side, a sharp kick on her right. She paused, placing both hands over her belly, and drew a long, slow breath. This wasn't for revenge, she reminded herself, though the icy burn of it was a constant companion. Revenge was a hot, messy emotion. This was about justice. It was about securing a fortress for the 2 innocent lives who would soon depend solely on her. The house, her house, was that fortress. She thought of Elliot's casual signature on that long-forgotten document, a flick of a pen in a moment of supreme distraction. It was the ultimate irony. His own arrogance had forged the very weapon that would be used against him. She met Kate at the firm's imposing glass tower in Century City. The conference room was on the 45th floor, a sterile box of chrome and leather with a panoramic view of the sprawling city below. It felt like being in the sky, disconnected from the world. Kate gave her a single approving nod. "You look ready," she said. Isabella simply nodded back. There was nothing left to say. The strategy was set, the evidence meticulously arranged in 3 identical black binders that sat in the center of the vast, polished mahogany table. Elliot and his lawyer, a man named Daniel Peterson, arrived precisely on time. Peterson was exactly the kind of man Isabella expected Arthur Sterling's firm to send impeccably dressed in a Savile Row suit with silvered temples, a warm, predatory smile, and the unmistakable air of a man who had never lost a fight he was paid enough to win. He exuded a patronizing confidence that set Isabella's teeth on edge. Elliot, however, was a storm cloud of suppressed fury. He was dressed for a board meeting projecting power, but the tight clench of his jaw and the furious, wounded look in his eyes betrayed him. He deliberately avoided looking at Isabella, his gaze fixed on a point on the wall just over her head. It was a pathetic attempt to diminish her, to render her invisible. It only strengthened her resolve. They took their seats. The air in the room was thick with unspoken animosity, the silence broken only by the faint, sterile hum of the building's climate control. Mr. Peterson began, his voice a smooth, reasonable baritone, as if he were mediating a minor business dispute. "Thank you for meeting with us. We're here today with the shared goal of finding a swift, discreet, and amicable path forward. Elliot, as you know, holds Isabella in the highest regard, and he is deeply saddened that their paths are diverging." Isabella had to physically restrain herself from laughing. Kate's face remained a mask of polite neutrality. Peterson continued, opening his briefcase with a soft click. "Naturally, in these situations, emotions can run high. It is our job to set them aside and be practical. Elliot is prepared to be exceptionally generous to ensure Isabella's comfort and the future of their children." He slid a single, elegantly bound document across the table. "He is offering a one-time settlement of $5 million tax-free. Furthermore, he will establish a generous child support arrangement, far exceeding state guidelines. In exchange, we require a full and final dissolution of the marriage, and of course a comprehensive and mutual non-disclosure agreement." He sat back, his smile suggesting this was a foregone conclusion, an act of unparalleled magnanimity. Elliot finally looked at Isabella, his expression a mixture of anger and a strange sort of triumphant pity, as if to say, "See, I'm still taking care of you, even after you've betrayed me with these absurd accusations." Kate didn't touch the document. She let it sit in the middle of the table, an insultingly small monument to their gross miscalculation. "The offer," Kate said, her voice clear and cutting through the smug atmosphere, "is rejected." Peterson's smile tightened at the edges. "Ms. Mercer, with all due respect, this is a more than generous offer. It would be wise to advise your client against litigation. A public court battle would be deeply unpleasant for everyone involved." The threat was no longer veiled. It was laid bare on the table. "I agree," Kate said, her placid demeanor unnerving them. "A public battle would be devastating, which is why I'm surprised you'd risk one." She slowly opened one of the black binders in front of her. "Let's talk about the actual community property that needs to be divided. Your client seems to have forgotten a few things." Kate slid the first page across the table. It was a corporate filing for an LLC. "Perhaps Mr. Vance can tell us about CS Ventures LLC, Incorporated, 6 months ago. Our forensic accountant found it quite interesting. It was funded with an initial transfer of $1.2 million from a Nexus Dynamics subsidiary account, an account funded entirely during the marriage. Elliot flinched as if he'd been struck. Peterson snatched the paper, his eyes scanning it quickly. "A standard corporate entity for market research," he began, but Kate was already pushing the next document forward. "The sole officer of which is a Miss Chloe Sterling," Kate said, her voice dropping a register. "I believe she's an employee at Nexus A Junior 1 at that. Quite a promotion." She didn't wait for a response. The next page was a wire transfer confirmation. "And then there is this $80,000 payment to Sally May, clearing the entirety of Miss Sterling's student loan debt. A very generous employee bonus, wouldn't you say, paid from your joint marital savings account, Mr. Vance?" The next page was a lease agreement. "And the lease on the 2-bedroom apartment at the Oceana in Santa Monica, co-signed by Mr. Vance. I imagine the views are spectacular." With each document, the color drained from Elliot's face, replaced by a ghastly pallor. Peterson's legalistic composure was cracking, his furious glare shifting between the papers and his client, who was now staring at the table as if willing it to swallow him whole. "This is circumstantial," Peterson sputtered, shuffling the papers. "A collection of misinterpreted documents designed to slander my client. Is it—" Kate slid a stack of glossy 8x10 photographs onto the table. The top one showed Elliot and Chloe laughing as they unlocked the door to the Santa Monica apartment. The next showed them kissing on a hotel balcony in London. The next holding hands by a pool in Napa. The images were clear, undeniable, and utterly damning. "My investigator is very thorough," Kate said softly. "As I'm sure you know, Mr. Peterson, marital infidelity itself doesn't move the needle much in California divorces. But misappropriation of marital assets to fund that infidelity, that moves the needle a great deal. Judges tend to frown on it." Elliot finally erupted his chair, scraping back as he slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! What is this a shakedown?" He finally looked directly at Isabella, his eyes burning with a hateful, desperate rage. "What do you want, Isabella? Is this what it's all about? Money? After everything I've given you, you want to humiliate me and bleed me dry?" The room fell silent. Isabella held his gaze, her own expression unyielding. For the first time, she spoke her voice, not a whisper, but a clear, calm statement of fact. "I want the house." The sheer audacity of it hung in the air. Peterson let out a sharp, incredulous bark of a laugh. "The house, the estate is worth over $20 million. That is an absurd, non-starter demand. We will fight you on this for a decade if we have to." The land was purchased with Mr. Vance's premarital assets, giving him a significant separate property claim. "And that," Kate interrupted, her timing perfect, her voice dropping to a near whisper that commanded the entire room's attention, "brings us to our final exhibit." From the last binder, she removed a simple stapled document, slightly yellowed with age. She didn't slide it. She placed it deliberately in the center of the table. "I believe you'll both recognize this. It's the Design and Project Management Agreement for the property at 1420 Skyline Drive, signed by your client on October the 14th, 7 years ago." Elliot squinted at it, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. A distant, unimportant memory. Peterson, however, picked it up with a lawyer's instinctual caution. Isabella watched him, her heart hammering against her ribs. She watched his eyes move across the first page, then the second. She saw the subtle furrow in his brow as he reached Article 4. She saw him stop. He reread the paragraph, his lips moving silently. He flipped back to the signature page, confirming it was Elliot's, then flipped back to Article 4, Section B. The confident, condescending mask of Daniel Peterson completely disintegrated. The blood drained from his face, and he lowered the document to the table as if it were radioactive. "What is it?" Elliot demanded, his voice strained. Kate leaned forward, her voice low and precise, a surgeon describing a fatal diagnosis. "That document, Mr. Peterson, as you've just realized, grants my client, Isabella Rossi, a 40% vested ownership stake and a senior lien on the property as professional compensation for her architectural services. A document that was properly executed and filed with the Los Angeles County Recorder's Office upon the project's completion." She let that sink in before delivering the killing blow. "It is also a document whose existence your client failed to disclose to City National Bank when he secured an $8 million business loan against 100% of the property's value 6 months ago. By misrepresenting the ownership structure of the asset to the lender, he didn't just lie on a form. He committed bank fraud, a federal offense under 18 U.S. Code Section 13444. The penalty for which, upon conviction, is a rather substantial fine and up to 30 years in federal prison." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a silence so profound it seemed to have a physical weight. Elliot stared at the paper, then at his lawyer, his face a grotesque mask of dawning horror and complete incomprehension. The memory hit him then, Isabella in his study, the paper, his distraction, the quick, dismissive signature. "It's just a formality." Her words echoed in his mind like a death knell. Peterson looked at Kate, his professional life flashing before his eyes. He had walked in here to bully a pregnant housewife and had walked into a federal racketeering case against his client, brought to light by his own boss's daughter's affair. He was trapped. Kate sat back, her work complete. "So here is our offer. It is not a negotiation. You will sign over your 60% of the house to Isabella, a full transfer of title. She will assume the existing mortgage and your fraudulent $8 million loan, thus indemnifying you from the consequences of your little chat with the bank. The crest will be hers, entirely. You will also capitalize a trust for the twins with $10 million. Their future will be secure." She paused, letting the terms settle. "In return for your immediate and full compliance, all copies of this agreement, along with the extensive documentation of your indiscretions, will be sealed. We will agree to the mutual non-disclosure you wanted. You walk away with your company, what's left of your reputation, and most importantly, your freedom. Or," she looked at her watch, "we conclude this meeting, and my very next call will be to the U.S. Attorney's Office. You have 1 hour." It wasn't a choice. It was a surrender. Elliot Vance, the tech titan, the boardroom predator, the man who bent the world to his will, was broken. He slumped in his chair, the fight completely gone from him, leaving only a hollowed-out shell. He finally looked at Isabella, truly looked at her. He didn't see a hormonal, hysterical woman. He saw the architect, the brilliant, meticulous woman he had married and so profoundly underestimated. He had given her a blank canvas and a budget, and she had designed his masterpiece. And then, when he betrayed her, she had calmly and precisely designed his demolition. 3 months later, Isabella stood in the soft sage-green nursery, bathed in the warm glow of the California afternoon sun. She held her son Luca against her shoulder, his tiny head nestled under her chin. In the crib beside her, her daughter Mia slept soundly, her little chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. The house was quiet. It was a serene, contented silence that she was slowly getting used to. All of Elliot's things were gone, replaced by a sense of light and space. She walked to the vast window, looking out over the city sparkling below. The view was the same, but her perspective had changed entirely. It was no longer a symbol of a man's ambition or a shared broken dream. It was now the backdrop to her children's lives. It was a sanctuary. She had fought for a fortress she had won, not with anger, but with intelligence. The house was no longer the crest, a monument to a man's ego. It was home, her home, built from her own heart and mind, and now secured by her own strength. Isabella's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about the money you have or the power you wield, but about the intelligence, foresight, and courage you possess when everything is on the line. Elliot Vance saw his wife as a beautiful part of his collection, forgetting that she was the architect not only of their home, but of her own destiny. She used her greatest skill, her meticulous, brilliant mind, to protect her children and reclaim her life from the ruins of his betrayal. Her victory wasn't just in winning a mansion, it was in proving that integrity and intellect can be the most formidable weapons of all. What are your thoughts on Isabella's strategy? Could you have been as patient and calculated in her position? Let us know in the comments below. If this story of justice and empowerment resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And make sure you subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable true stories. Thank you for listening.